Here are the 5 factors which school gets very wrong. I believe that in school there should be no religious or political subject. Education should be about sparking curiosity and then just giving the space and the time for the students to do the work themselves. Children and teenagers are surprisingly reasonable. Now, time for the side note about why you exist. You have to love the truth. Love is the basis of education. Do we really think it's in the kids and teenagers' interest to get up at 6:30 in the morning and go and spend 8 to 10 hours in school? Neglecting emotions is basically neglecting everything that drives the world and its people. It's the system's responsibility to make it interesting, not the students' responsibility to somehow make dull educational content interesting for themselves. I've had amazing cases in my life where something from a board game I use in my job and stuff like this, because everything is just about structures in this world and about connecting neurons. Hello, I'm Kalin, founder of an 8-figure startup. Today we're going to talk about education, the education system, how we can work with it and how we can work around it. From all the systems we have in our world, I believe the education system to be by far the worst and least effective, and even harmful in certain cases. There are 5 main reasons why the education system sucks. Before we look into the reasons, we need to know what is the goal of education. Is it knowledge? Is it something more? The main problem is that education doesn't try to give children freedom and instead tries to reduce their freedom, which is so right from the start, the incentive is bad, and it's no wonder that the end result is also bad. There are a lot of calls for reforming the education system, but when the core incentive is bad, reform is not good enough. The education system has to be destroyed and completely rebuilt from scratch. In primary and high school, I was an excellent student. I got almost straight A's, but I remember almost nothing from school. Why is that? And also, even worse, I didn't create any intuition about sciences and arts or anything at all, actually, because we learned a lot of facts and a lot of process related stuff, but we didn't learn the basics intuitively. I was so interested in things like geography, biology, physics, but I didn't develop any intuition in physics, for example. And just many years later, watching YouTube videos, there are some wonderful science channels on YouTube, I managed to build a much better intuition because things were explained differently, not just more visually, but just differently. The emphasis was on the foundations, and in school, the emphasis was not on the foundations unless you had a very special teacher who personally put the emphasis on the foundations and the guiding principles. So, before we talk about how to get it right, we need to see everything that's wrong, which is a lot. Here are the 5 factors which school gets very wrong. Number 1, school ignores the reality about children and their emotions. Emotions will always be the guiding thing in life. People make choices emotionally and then justify them rationally. So if you ignore emotions, you ignore the root cause of all of people's choices. So neglecting emotions is basically neglecting everything that drives the world and its people. And in school, we certainly neglect emotions. We have certain rules, we have certain goals connected to knowledge, but we completely ignore emotions. And given that these years are very formative for children and adolescents, it's basically a crime to ignore their emotions and try to put everyone into the same box and want certain non-emotional goals from emotional kids. So, what do we want from education? Do we really think it's in the kids and teenagers' interest to get up at 6:30 in the morning and go and spend 8 to 10 hours in school, basically sleepwalking through their classes because they didn't get enough sleep and trying to learn something? It's impossible to listen to teachers for 8 hours a day and not just losing interest when you're also underslept and tired. That's just not the way true learning happens. True learning requires the best possible circumstances, which mean that you have to be slept enough, you have to had good food, you have to be in a curiosity mode, and you should never lose interest. The moment a kid loses interest, they hear what the teacher say, but because they don't have real interest, they will forget it because the brain only prioritizes information which is interesting or somehow very important or critical for survival. Since nothing that we learn in school is critical for survival, if we don't make it interesting, then it will never be remembered. And that's why I don't remember almost anything from school, because it was never really interesting. It was somehow partially interesting at times, but very rarely, only when you had a really engaged teacher, it was really interesting. And given that you spend too much time in school and get up too early for school, it just the energy, the curiosity is not there. There's a major misconception about education. And the misconception is we give you the knowledge as school system and teachers, and it's the student's responsibility to learn it. And if the only way to learn it long term is to make it interesting, it's the student's responsibility to make it interesting. But this is bullshit, because who gives the content and the attitude and the rules and everything that makes the content interesting or not? It's the education system, the teachers. So it's the system's responsibility to make it interesting, not the student's responsibility to somehow make dull educational content interesting for themselves, especially when they are tired and underslept. So it's obvious that we have everything wrong here. Education should be about sparking curiosity and then just giving the space and the time for the students to do the work themselves. And what you can do in the meantime is try to teach children emotional intelligence, self-love, empathy, and foster a very good environment for all of this to happen. In the current age, not enough people have critical thinking and the real love for truth, for digging for the truth. And this is why many people are falling victims to misinformation and fake news. But what is the root cause of this problem? The root cause is that in order to search for the truth and really invest your time and energy in this, you have to love the truth. Love is the basis of education. If you don't love the truth, you won't bother searching for it. And where does the love for the truth come from? The love for the truth comes from the deep understanding of how the world works, about the immense value of truth in the game of life, and about the strive for freedom, because, as people say, the truth will set you free, not something else. So the love for truth is very connected to the strive for freedom. And if we don't teach children to strive for freedom in school, if we only create a lot of rules for them and constrain their freedom, they will not learn to love truth. And the end result will be a society that is very easily manipulated by populists, by corporations, by anyone who has the benefit of manipulating groups of people. Many people don't even understand why it's important to strive for the truth. They are like, whatever. And this is because they didn't learn to love truth and to strive for this type of freedom in school. So the entire structure of education should foster empathy and freedom, which is not the current state of things. Freedom means only rules in school which children agree with. Basically, you cannot run a school without any rules, it's obvious, but the rules should be one that children agree with. Children and teenagers are surprisingly reasonable, so you should just listen more. If the children write their own rules, their levels of engagement will be much better later when they have to follow them. Fostering love and empathy in school is not easy to describe because the current school system is just so far away from this. But there is a lovely documentary about a very special Japanese elementary school teacher who taught fourth grade students about love and empathy and about expressing their emotions, even if it's hard for children that young. And there's a link to this documentary in the comments. I very highly recommend it. Here are some ideas how we can change the basics of school. No smartphones below the age of 16. Distraction is very bad for curiosity because our mind just wanders around and cannot achieve any depth, so we can be curious. At least distraction of the kind that smartphones and social media provide. If you feel addicted to anything, including your smartphone or social media, then you will always have this in the back of your mind, and this destroys any deep dive into another direction. School should not begin before 9 a.m. and this should be non-negotiable. It needs sleep, and sleep deprivation is considered torture by the United Nations. So if someone is sleep deprived in a prison, organizations like Amnesty International and such may be involved because this is considered torture under international law. But somehow, when it's our children, it's entirely different. We sacrifice something that is considered a basic human right, sleep, so they can learn. But they will learn nothing when they are underslept. So it's a sacrifice of something very important for nothing. Some topics are boring and we cannot do much about it. But every boring topic can be made interesting if you involve outdoor activities, games, or just spice it up in any way possible. And we should do this in every occasion because the minute the child is bored, they turn their priority filter off. And like we say in Bulgarian, everything they hear goes through one ear and goes out the other. Nothing stays in the head. So it's extremely important. This is maybe the most important intellectual rule of education, is that the child should never be bored. There should not be a single boring minute or you destroy hours of knowledge. One of the most depressing things in school when I was learning was the silence that there was all along. And I think school can greatly benefit from some introduction of music in some form. Sometimes when there is quiet time in school, like all of you are trying to solve a math problem, then music could potentially help. And if children feel distracted by some type of music with lyrics, it can just be classical music or soundtracks or something that just makes the silence like more bearable. Because in complete silence, there are two ways. You can either really deep dive intellectually and achieve some intellectual breakthrough, hopefully, or you can get extremely bored because silence makes everything a bit more boring if it's already boring. So silence may help the best kids in the class, but it will definitely hinder the kids in the class who have, and may hinder the kids in the class that have more problems with the learning process. It's very important to help the least accomplished kids in the class catch the group, the middle ground, because otherwise they just become, because otherwise they lose confidence, and from one point further there is no going back. They just accept that they're dumb, they cannot learn anything, and they stop trying. And these kids may often drop out of school and may cause problems for themselves and for society. It's very important that there should be no children left behind. I have studied under two educational systems in Bulgaria and in Denmark. And in Denmark, it was a strong focus not to leave any kid behind, while in Bulgaria, no one cared. The teacher would always help the best kids, not the kids that were underperforming. And this is a system which may create great academics, but will also create people who feel like losers and causes a lot of problem for these people and for society. I believe that in school there should be no religious or political subjects. Why? Because these fluid subjects, while very important to be learned at some age, require a lot of critical thinking because schools are some kind of extension of the political system in a country, and there will always be some bias. When you learn history, there is always some bias that your country is the greatest. So this bias is visible in history and in anything political that you learn, and if there is a dominant religion in a country, also in anything religious that you learn. And it will be impossible not to have such a bias. And children will encounter something biased at a moment where their critical thinking is not developed yet. So they may become biased for a long time, and then because of confirmation bias, not confront this bias for a lot of their life. So teaching kids political and religious subjects may be counterproductive in school. And lastly, school can be a natural support system for children who have severe problems at home. So children with abusive, neglective, or otherwise broken families can have their best time of the day in school, and school can support them through their life, because there are many children who have really nowhere to share that they're going through a difficult time, but they're already going to school. So if the school has a supportive system of counselors or like any other system that could support such kids, it can be the first line of help for children in such families. And also, since many such children become bullies in school because they just need to vent their negative emotions, this will also greatly help with bullying, because children basically don't bully because they're evil, they just need somewhere to vent and don't know any better way. So intervention in this way could be also very beneficial to reduce bullying, which is a big problem in schools. All of these things are not so easy to change, but they're very important and very fundamental. But there are also things that are extremely easy to change that we are not changing. And one of these is a very wrong choice of subjects. The problem with the subjects in school is that the world changes and the subjects stay the same. Current school system that we have in most Western countries, and probably mostly all around the world, is made to produce academics and workers for factories, because these were the main demands from the age. These were the main demands from the time of the Industrial Revolution. There were factories, and we needed obedient people who wanted to follow rules and were okay with that, even if the rules were not in their favor. So people were needed to work in factories, and the education system needed to produce those people. So the education system is a bit structured like a factory. And also, technological progress needed a lot of scientists and engineers, so we made the school system so it can produce a lot of scientists, academics, engineers, which is a great thing. But in the current age, we also need a lot of doctors, a lot of experts on different humanitarian fields. So there is a certain shift in what we need, but we didn't shift the subject. But the biggest problem with the subject is that it's rare that every scientist or every arts are equally interesting for kids. So you should have much more subjects that are by choice and much less mandatory subjects, a bit like we do it in most universities. I recommend 11 mandatory subjects, and they are not at all the ones that are taught in school. Of course, number one, you should learn your language. You should be able to read, write, communicate, but also make arguments, debate, and basically express your opinions intellectually. This is extremely important, no-brainer. Number two, English, if not the native language. English is the language of the world, the language of the internet, the language of the most of the best content created in the world. So you should absolutely have fluent English, spoken, written, every kind. So English is extremely important and should be learned from a young age, because languages are best learned at a young age. So English is the language of the world and you should definitely know it. And also AI is rapidly getting better and better, and it will always be best in English because the most and the best content is in English. It learns from it, so it will also be best in English. Number 3, mathematics is the foundation of all exact scientists, is the foundation of all exact sciences, and you should definitely know the basics of mathematics. Is just in too many places. So mandatory mathematics. Number 4, logic and intuition about numbers, statistics and sources, critical thinking and research. This is a family of this is needed for truth searching, and it's very important to build it from a young age so you know how to differentiate the truth from bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit in the world, so definitely in school from a young age we should learn how to feel when something may be bullshit and how to search deeply, find sources and prove if it's bullshit or not. Number 5, anatomy. You should know how your body works. It's a no-brainer. I don't know how in school you learn anatomy for the first time in 9th grade. From 1st to 9th grade, you don't care that you have a body. So at least in Bulgaria, anatomy comes in 9th grade. Anatomy should be learned much more, and also good healthy practices like sleeping enough, good food, how to protect your energy levels, how to exercise, and how to avoid addictions. They should definitely be taught much more. Number 6, psychology. Psychology should be learned where at the earliest moment when the kid's brain is ready to accept the basics of psychology. Not really sure when that is, but we learn far too little psychology in school. I learned half a year, very small amount of hours psychology, and I think even I was the first one to learn it. Before me, the kids didn't learn any psychology in school, which is just terrible. Psychology, you have to know your mind, you have a mind, you need to know how to help yourself and others with mental health, and you need to learn the basics of emotional intelligence. Number 7, economics and entrepreneurship. Money is everywhere around us, a very important driving force in the world. You need to know how money works. Not in general as in macroeconomics, but in your life you need to know how money works, and you need to have basic financial literacy. You should also know the basics of sales, marketing, and entrepreneurship. You need to know how to assign value to assets. You need to know about concepts like return on investment. And also you need to learn things like business ethics and philanthropy, and know really how you can take money from the world and also how to give them back. You need to learn about productivity in school. Productivity is extremely important because it's a multiplier of your efforts along your entire life. So productivity should be learned in school. Things like how to set your computer or laptop for optimal work, how to do things with files, with lists, with Excel, and you should learn some touch typing, because if you type slow, basically you lose like few years of your life in productivity. It's just not an option. Also, an important part of productivity, number 9, is optimal use of the web. What does this mean? Best practices for email, browsing, searching, building simple websites, promoting yourself on social media, basics of SEO, and the basics of spam as a concept, which means that when you cannot achieve something with quality, you should always try with quantity. You wrote 10 companies asking for a partnership, didn't work, write 500. Then you see if it's just bad luck or bad message or something. So spam as a concept, as in quantity sometimes is needed for quality, is a very important thing, and it should be learned in school. Number 10, a diverse world. So we need to have some intuitions that countries and cultures may be very different from our own. Most people have no idea and find this only when they start to travel. It will be fun learning this in school via games, quizzes, stories, arts. It's something that the children should know because it's important for them to feel that the world is a beautiful and diverse place and it's worth their efforts to make it better. Also, kids in Western countries should learn that there are much poorer countries on earth and help may be needed for them to get out of poverty traps, conflicts, preventable disease, and other of the hardest problems to solve in the world. And the last one, number 11, physical education. That includes absolutely everyone. So everyone can have fun moving around. Some kids may want to play football, chase a ball like crazy. Others might prefer less active sports, but there should be some sport for everyone. Everyone needs to be physically active. It's built in our biology, and living your life without movement is very bad for your physical and mental health. The problem that a lot of kids have, more prevalent with, but not only, is that they never realize how fun sports are. There may be two reasons for this. They never had encounters with fun sports in good groups with friends, or team sports, which are the most fun ones. Team sports are very good for girls, but there are some girls who have almost never played a team sport. And this is very important for mental health, for confidence, for feeling part of a team and teamwork. And sports are very fun, but not all sports are equally fun. We should understand that playing football will always be more fun than running or swimming for most people. Boring sports, as I call them, like running or swimming, have their benefits because they are relaxing, they are flowy, they are a bit like meditation, and you can push your body to the limit because when you run, you really exercise a lot, while when you play football, you run and then there's a break and then there's a period where for 1 or 2 minutes you don't move a lot, then you make a sprint, then you don't move a lot. So you don't usually push your body to the limit unless it's a very professional sport. But in running, you can really push your body to the limit, which is something that has a lot of positive consequences because you learn that you can do more than you felt it was possible, that you can run faster, that you can run further. So the boring sports have their benefit, but they are much harder to stick because running is boring. It doesn't release so much dopamine. So you won't feel the urge to run as much as you would feel the inner urge to play football, tennis, or another non-boring dopamine sport. The good thing about sports like football or tennis is that you have these precision things that you don't have in, let's say, running or swimming, like scoring a goal right in the corner or hitting the corner of the court with a tennis ball. And these and the urge to hit these perfect, precise shots induce a lot of dopamine and really hook you up to play the sport, which is kind of an addiction, but probably the best one you can have is to be addicted to such feelings in sports, because sports are really beneficial for physical and mental health, and you cannot really overdo football because you get tired and you have to stop playing. And one of the best things that happened in my life was that in my primary school, from 4th to 7th grade, I had a great group of friends and we played like 3 hours of football every day. We were running like crazy. And this was really beneficial for my health. I built a lot of stamina in my muscles, and I built a lot of balance and athleticism, of not the kind that I'm very strong, but that I'm agile and balanced and can run a lot and can make swift turns and change direction and have all of this good coordination in my body, which I still have, and it's one of the most joyful things in my life. And one of the saddest things that I can think about is that there are many people, especially girls, who have never experienced this feeling. The feeling of running fast, then the ball changes direction, you make a sharp turn, and you are like a superhero who balances turning on a very small radius or something that you never felt that your body was capable of doing, but you do it, and it's extremely joyful. So physical education should really just be the spark, so kids learn to love sports for life and learn to find sports everywhere, because sports is everywhere around you. When you throw your tumbled piece of paper into a rubbish bin, you don't have to go to the rubbish bin. You just imagine that's the basketball hoop and you throw it in, and you can do everything in your life that's related to movement as a sport, and this is extremely fun. And it's very good for hunter mode, very good for joy and happiness. And it's just part of the life flow of people who can practice it. But unfortunately, very few people live their life in such a way. When people ask me how I always seem joyful and motivated, one of the main reasons is that when I move around, especially when I'm alone, I always move around in a way that's like a sport or a dance or something in between. It's just, in my head, it's like a dance, but it's from outside, it may seem like running, jumping, and other like sports, elements of sports. And this may seem stupid from the outside. For example, me running downstairs and then trying to open the door of the apartment block where I live with a perfect swift motion. But it doesn't matter because I really enjoy it and I don't give a fuck what other people think. And they are the ones who lose for not having this joy in their lives. These things can be cultivated from a very young age. Kids have a lot of potential to do things in the joyful way, and we should encourage it and develop it instead of criticizing and killing it. What is missing here from the usual mandatory subjects? Well, scientists, humanities, and art. This should be present as an option, but should not be mandatory, because if someone is really, really not interested in history, why teach them history? They would not remember anything after it, so it's just a mutual waste of time. But of course, everyone should have the option to learn any science. Everyone should have the option of learning any science that they like. The optional sciences, of which you should choose at least one without parent involvement, and you should be able to choose join more at any time, and you should be able to change it if it becomes boring. In this way, every teacher will have incentive to make their science interesting. Otherwise, kids will just leave their science and go to a more interesting subject and teacher. So we see some healthy free market competition here. The scientists that should be optional and present everywhere, so have a teacher available, should be physics, chemistry, biology, ecology, and geography. Then we have the humanities and arts. And again, there should be at least one chosen, but you can join more at any time and change the initial one at any time. History and culture, literature, music, dance, which is really healthy and it's not taught in schools, unfortunately, theater, and other mixed arts. So how do we approach evaluation? How do we evaluate the progress? The 11 mandatory subjects should have some non-stressful form of progress evaluation. So not an end of the year test with all of the pressure, but some like testing skills on the go thing. We should be able to measure progress, but it should not be stressful for kids. First, because it's just bad to stress kids for things that are not life-changing for their life, and whether they have an A or B or C in 5th grade is definitely not life-changing, and we should teach kids that they should only stress for things that are important. Conditioning them to stress for things that are not important is very bad conditioning, because the role of stress is to stress on what's important. And if we stress on things that are not important, then we misuse the natural use of stress. So some non-stressful form of evaluation for the mandatory subjects. For the optional sciences, and for the optional humanities and arts, should not have mandatory evaluation for several reasons. First, if you're bad at geography, you have Google Maps, so your life will not suffer. You should be good at geography if it's interesting to you. Otherwise, no one cares. So these are not mandatory life skills, and you can be good or bad at them. The important thing is to have fun and develop curiosity. And also, in this way, when you have no mandatory evaluation, kids can follow their curiosity. They can take half a year of chemistry, and then, let's say, they hear that physics is more interesting, they try physics, it really is more interesting for them, and then they can have half a year of physics. Sure, they'll have a lot of missing blank spaces from the program of both chemistry and physics, but that's not bad. It's actually good because they may develop curiosity and try to fill them. And if they don't, it's just not their thing. No big deal, life goes on. And there should also be optional extra sports, both individual and team. Sports are just great for kids. So, from the wrong choice of subjects, we get to the wrong teaching of subjects, because of course it's wrong too. There's nothing that's not wrong with the educational system. We already talked about that school makes a very wrong assumption that it's the student's job to be motivated. So the school, the teachers, they take motivation for granted mostly, which is very bad because the main goal should be motivation and just preventing the kids from being bored. This is the first really wrong thing about school. But there's a second one, which is that the education system assumes that in order to teach something really well, you have to be systematic, which is logical, but wrong, because the brain doesn't work this way. Sure, if you have to teach something in a month, well, if you want to just give a lot of information, the best is just to put a lot of bullet points and sub-bullet points and just have some structure and teach the information this way. But then, after a year, the kid develops nothing because never had to connect any dots. Never had to see, but why is that? But how are those connected? Everything is given, and you just need to just shower the knowledge into your brain. While on the other hand, if you just give kids a bunch of random, seemingly connected pieces of knowledge, but don't connect them as an education system, as the teacher, the kid will try to connect the dots themselves, and this way to have deeper knowledge, intuitive knowledge. When the brain connected these dots by itself, then they receive very high priority in the long-term memory, and they are remembered basically forever. Everything that you discovered yourself in any field is remembered forever. So if you look at a very long-term perspective, the value of learning something that you will never use and forgetting it after 2 or 3 months is just zero. It's zero. But learning something, even if not directly related to your plans in life, but just being curious about it, making some tiny discovery of your own, even if it's already discovered by another 1,000 people, but just trying to connect some dots on your own means that this knowledge is there for life. It's intuitive knowledge, and you can use it, you can combine it, and I kid you not, every such piece of knowledge, there will be some point in life where you connect some other dots and it becomes useful. No knowledge that's about dot connecting is ever unuseful. And you remember it for life. Life is long, so you have a lot of chances for it to become useful. I've had amazing cases in my life where something from a board game I use in my job and stuff like this, because everything is just about structures in this world and about connecting neurons. A board game may have the same structure as a business if the structure is the same. That's all there is. It's all structure. So it's really important to build these structures, to connect dots, and our current education system is just not good enough for dot connecting. In some subjects such as maths, it's impossible not to do dot connecting, because when you solve a math problem, that's the thing you do. But In other subjects, we are just so far away from dot connecting that it's just terrible. But there's also another reason. Systematic things are boring. If you want to keep the interest of the children or teenager, you cannot afford to make anything boring. And just any system where the problem is solved, everything is put into a structure, into bullet points, into a diagram, it's already becomes half boring. There's always need to be something to fill in. The diagram should have a blank space for you to fill in, to complete the structure. There always should be some dots for connecting. Otherwise, it becomes boring, and when it's boring, it's never remembered, never used, and it never becomes intuition. Let's make a thought experiment. Let's say you have 20 hours of chemistry a year. Like, not 100, just 20. It's not a lot. What can you learn in 20 hours of chemistry? Well, the foundations. What can you learn in 100 hours of chemistry? Well, the foundations and some more complicated cases. So here we have a diminishing curve of what you learn that it's really important and what you learn that it's not really important. Return on the invested time is a diminishing curve. So then why not have just 20 hours of chemistry? Now let's think about how this will go in the real world. Let's get an average teacher. The average teacher is someone who doesn't have a profound love for kids, who doesn't have this outgoing force, and he is teaching mostly to show kids that he knows stuff. That's how most teachers work. That's why they become teachers, because they love showing people how smart they are and how they know stuff. Of course, some really nice teachers become teachers because they are very altruistic and want to pass the knowledge, but most teachers want to just show off. That's the reality. So, if you give the average teacher 20 hours, they will have to simplify, make it simple, so that they can teach you the basics of chemistry. But if you give them 100 hours, you give them 5 times more time to show off, which means that simple things will become more complicated because teacher wants to show off how much they know. And then the basics will be lost somewhere within the complications. Kids will just have too much information going in, and you cannot really connect the dots, as we talked, without understanding the basics. So when you learn the basics, intuition cannot form in a week before you learn the complications. Intuition needs months, years to form. So basically the best thing will be to learn 20 hours of chemistry this year, let the basics settle, and then learn, let's say, 20 hours of chemistry in half a year, in 1 year, and then we have the intuitive basis for this. And if it's taught in the right way, really focusing on the basics and the founding principles and the relations, this can really work. What we currently do is we learn the basics, we still haven't understood them, we still haven't felt them, and we learn the complications, and we learn the complicated cases, and because the basics are too simple to have the final test on, then we have the final tests on things that are very complicated, while we still didn't intuitively understand the basics. So what do? Instead of understanding, what do we cram? The things that the test will be on. We cram on complicated cases, and we lose the feel of the basics. Everything is lost into just this mesh that we don't fully understand. That's how a lot of real life education goes, and this is a big time waste because it sends us inside the signals that we don't understand it, that we're not good enough, and that this is not our subject. If we have 20 hours of chemistry, then we will force simplicity. And simplicity and understanding the basics is the most important thing in education. You think that you cannot learn chemistry in 20 hours a year? I'll now teach you the basics of chemistry in 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes we'll have time for a detour, and this detour will show why you probably exist, why you are born. And also, we'll learn a lot of interesting things about climate change. And all of this will happen in 5 minutes. Here, set, ready, go. So, nothing in the universe actually gets created or destroyed. It just changes form. This is like the basis of all the scientists. Energy is always preserved, either in the form of energy or mass, just as different types, some more visible than others. When something burns and there's a fire, the heat and light and the destruction of the fire is very visible, but the energy in the atomic bonds of the things that are burning is much less visible because it's very static and it's bound into the material itself. So the wood and the oxygen molecules have energy, and when they burn into a fire, the energy goes into the heat and the light of the fire, and we say that potential energy becomes other type of energy, in this type thermal. But the amount of energy is never changed. So the amount of energy in the molecules becomes the energy of the fire. So there's a lot of energy in molecules. Every molecule has a certain amount of energy, and this is the basics of all chemistry. Understood? Good. Then, next. Everything in the universe tries to get rid of potential energy. If there's an apple on a tree, it wants to fall down. If there's a balloon, it wants to shrink and just needs a little pop to shrink. Everything wants to get rid of its potential energy. It's like the universal desire of the universe. So the molecules, they also want to get rid of their potential energy and become other molecules without atomic bonds with less potential energy. So this is why things burn, because they want to get rid of their potential energy. What happens when things burn? The end result of the burning are molecules with little potential energy. And in the world, there are two very typical molecules like this. One is carbon dioxide, and the other one is water. Oxygen and hydrogen have high energy in their atomic bonds, while water, which has oxygen and hydrogen, has less. So if you burn oxygen and hydrogen, they explode, release a lot of energy, get rid of the potential energy, they are happy, and they become water. So water is basically the result of burning stuff. It's very counterintuitive because water is used to put out fires, but actually water is like the aftermath of a fire. Absolute same thing is with carbon dioxide, which has a very low energy molecule, and every industrial processes, every type of burning of anything basically which has carbon molecules and combines with the oxygen in the air leads to carbon dioxide. And when you have carbon dioxide, the molecule is happy, doesn't want to change anymore into anything. This is why when we release carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from all of our industrial processes, all of our power plants, and all of the burning of fossil fuels, when we produce steel, when we produce concrete, everything releases CO2 in the atmosphere, and we cannot get it back because it doesn't want to do any changes anymore. It's one of the lowest energy molecules. Understand this? Good. Now, time for the side note about why you exist. Air is made of mostly nitrogen, but also some oxygen. The nitrogen in the air has a super strong triple bond in its molecule, and the result is that air is mostly nitrogen, but you cannot get nitrogen to use it for anything chemical. And actually, it took humanity hundreds of years to learn how to get nitrogen from air and use it for something, even though air is 70% nitrogen, which is crazy. It's most of the air around us, but we cannot separate it. Separate this molecule and make it part of something else. In 1909, which is pretty late in terms of the development of humanity, industrial revolution, the Haber-Bosch process managed with a ton of heat and pressure, so a lot of energy added in, to break the nitrogen molecule and make ammonia, which is then used in a lot of chemical processes, but most critically for nitrogen fertilizer. In this year, the Earth's population was 1.7 billion people. Now it's about 8 billion people, and the main reason for this increase is that we have more food available. But the main reason we have more food available is nitrogen fertilizer, which was the first to be discovered and still the most widely used fertilizer today. So the fact that you were born is very related to the fact that there was enough food for your parents and you to exist. So you would most likely not exist, not ever been born if we didn't learn how to break the triple bond from the nitrogen molecule in the air, which requires just so much force. This is an extremely happy molecule. It has very low potential energy, and you need to add a lot of energy to do something with it. It's the same with CO2. Basically, all of the climate deniers saying that CO2 is somehow not accumulating in the atmosphere or whatever, they cannot be right. If you have critical thinking, you should know that we are accumulating CO2 because it's the result of a lot of our processes, clearly, and it cannot really go anywhere. A lot of it is absorbed by the oceans, but the oceans have their limit, and soon they will not be able to absorb much more. And of course, some of it remains in the air. Why? Because it's a very happy molecule and it doesn't want to undergo any further changes. In order to take the CO2 molecule from the air, you need to add energy. So you need to sacrifice energy, give it to the molecule, and then it may become some other molecule and stop climate change. Who does this? Plants. How do they do it? They take the energy from the sun, which is called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is like reverse fire. What happens in fire, which the turning of one molecule into another and releasing light and heat, photosynthesis is exactly the opposite. Heat and light comes from the sun, and it reverses a chemical equation, and then you get a molecule which has energy, which of course plants need and love. Also, it's completely proven that CO2 causes warming due to a greenhouse effect. So climate change is a no-brainer. But why is there an industry called direct air capture which tries to get CO2 out of the air with some big machines? Well, this is an industry that is just defying the laws of physics and conservation of energy. It's somehow now a big industry. It's projected to be more than $500 million annually by 2030, according to MarketWatch. And it's just out of this world how this shit exists, because it's impossible. We burn the fossil fuels, create the happy low energy molecule, and then we want to sacrifice energy to get it out of the air. And yes, if we never burned it, it will just be better, because we lose energy in this process and then we lose energy in the backwards process. We lose double the energy in an equation which is always below zero sum. So we can never win. And still there are investors pouring their money out of this. And why? Because they learned chemistry in school, not in the right way, being bored, and instead of understanding and developing critical thinking, they were being bored and they were developing bullshit thinking. And if you think that people who are getting investor money are smarter than you, you're wrong. Mostly they are just better at bullshitting. And where did they learn to fake it and bullshit it? In school, because it was boring and they had to come around with some other way to get good grades. When we accept mediocre educational systems, we accept mediocrity, not just then and there in school, we accept it for the whole world, for life, and it is absolutely unacceptable. Now imagine the CO2 explanation with videos, with interactive diagrams, with memes, and cool can be absolutely interesting and fascinating, and this is how it should be. Right now, it's so far away from that reforming is impossible. The school system needs to be destroyed and built from the ground up using the right principles so that the children have freedom, curiosity, and are never bored. In the new system, the student and their happiness and motivation should be the priority, not teachers, headmasters, corporation, the government, or the crazy ambitious parent. The student should be in charge and be mentally and emotionally supported and entertained, or otherwise nothing will stick. They should want to learn, no matter if they are 10 or 30 years old. And there is no alternative to that. Otherwise, we settle with mediocrity with no end in sight. I strongly recommend the TED Talks of Sir Ken Robinson, which are in the spirit of raising happy, motivated, and never bored kids. As I grow younger, we produce extremely high quality content in which we invest a lot of money without having any sponsorship and any monetization and any revenue. We do this because we believe it's important for the world. So we would thank you a lot if you share, like, subscribe, ring the bell, and help us spread our message. Thank you.